Of Pride discussion. My name is Patrick Kelleher. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a features and special reports writer at Pink News. I'm really delighted to be hosting this session today, which is a part of Pride for All, an online Pride celebration run by Pink News. The festival aims to highlight activities and contents that everyone, no matter where they live, can attend Pride. And today we're joined by Peter Tatchell to reflect on 50 years of Pride. In the early 1970s, Peter was a member of the Gay Liberation Front, which hosted London's first ever Pride March on the 1st of July 1972. And this year, Pride for All is supporting LGBTQ plus Refugees Welcome, which is Pink News' fundraiser for those displaced by the war in Ukraine. And the link to the fundraiser will be at the bottom of the screen, and we urge everyone watching to join in and support our LGBTQ plus siblings. And the hashtag for the event is hashtag Pride for All. So to kick us off, I'd like just to ask you, Peter, to introduce yourself and tell us your pronouns and just tell us a little bit about when you started campaigning for LGBTQ plus rights.
My name is Peter Tatchell. My pronouns are he, him. I first began LGBT plus campaigning back in 1969 when I was 17 years old. I never heard about the Stonewall riots at the time, but I did hear about subsequent marches by the newly formed Gay Liberation Front in New York, and that inspired me. I thought to myself, yes, I want to be part of this movement. I want to help make change. I want to defeat homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia.
That's amazing. And we've obviously mentioned as well that this year marks 50 years since the first ever Pride March in the UK. It was organised by the Gay Liberation Front in 1972. And this year, veterans of that original march are going to be hosting their own protest march through the streets of London on the 1st of July. I was wondering, what would you like to see come from that march? And do you expect there will be many similarities or differences to that first march back in 1972?
Well, of course, the first thing about the march by the veterans and supporters on the 1st of July is to remember and commemorate that historic first ever Pride in the UK. It was an incredibly exciting, exhilarating, and actually quite daring thing to do because it had never been done before. We had no idea how many people would turn out. Back then, most LGBT plus people were deeply closeted. They would dare not reveal themselves because they feared arrest, bashing, rejection by their friends and family, and perhaps even losing their jobs. So, that's it's an anniversary that's worth remembering because it kickstarted the whole Pride movement in this country. And it was very pivotal as well in the forward march for LGBT plus rights and liberation. I hope also that out of this 1st of July march, we will recognize the people who were there and the contribution they made, but also be encouraged to continue what they began. There are still so many issues here in the UK and around the world that we have to fight for and win. And this 1st of July parade is us saying, we really do want to carry on the fight that was begun 50 years ago. Plus, of course, we want to remind people that Pride is a celebration and a protest. We are not happy, many of us who were there in 72, at the way Pride has become so corporate and commercial. We accept that there needs to be some sponsorship and funding, but the corporates really dominate. They're the only ones who can afford the big extravagant floats in the main parade. We just think that we need to reconfigure Pride to get back to the grassroots. It should be by and for the LGBT plus community. We should be front and center. And people like the Mayor of London and others are welcome, but they shouldn't be taking pride of place. The veterans from 72 should be front and center at Pride this year.
Absolutely. And obviously, on that topic of the commercialization of Pride, you've obviously been very vocal about this in the past. You've said that it's been hijacked by businesses, that it's fundamentally against the principle of Pride. I'm wondering, do you think that Pride more broadly has lost the spirit of activism? And if so, what can we do to focus our attentions so that it's more focused on civil rights and equality again?
Well, I'd say really for probably 2 decades, Pride has pretty much downplayed the struggle for LGBT plus human rights. It's been promoted as a party. And of course, we all like a party, we all enjoy fun, and Pride should be a joyful, fun day. But I think in the current circumstance where we still don't have a ban on conversion therapy, and when the government is proposing to exclude trans people from that ban, when we don't have reform of the Gender Recognition Act to ease the process by which trans people affirm their true gender identity and change their legal documents with ease, when we still have LGBT plus refugees refused asylum in this country, and even now being threatened with deportation to Rwanda, in this country alone, there's so many issues we still have to battle for, not to mention the global struggle, where still today 69 countries criminalize same-sex relations, some with just a few years imprisonment and others up to life imprisonment. And of course, there are 12 Muslim majority countries that still have the death penalty for same-sex relations. And on top of that, there are 43 countries that either explicitly or by interpretation of general laws criminalize trans people. So the battle is far, far, far from won. And, we need to, ensure that the event is properly funded, but not at the expense of letting corporates dominate and letting politics and human rights slide to the back room.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so much more work for us all to do. And I know that one of the big controversies within the Pride movement in the UK over the last couple of years has been some of the issues faced within Pride in London. There have been some really damning allegations within the organisation of bullying, of racism. I was wondering, what was your reaction to those allegations and to that controversy more broadly?
Well, it's so shocking and so completely contrary to the values and ethos of Pride as it was originally formulated. Back at the first Pride in 1972, we were championing LGBT plus human rights, but we also stood in solidarity with the women's movement, the Black and Asian communities, people with disabilities, um, all those who are marginalized, disadvantaged, and cast out from the mainstream. So we always had this sense of we were part of a much bigger, wider movement. And the idea of tolerating or looking the other way, let alone perpetrating racism, was completely anathema. What I find so shocking is that these very serious allegations were made against Pride in London, yet even to this day, they've not been properly investigated. There's been no investigation, no report, and no disciplinary action taken against the offenders. That is just so, so, so wrong. Homophobia and racism are both social evils that we must challenge. We are a movement that was founded on the principle of inclusion, that pride should be open to all on a free and equal basis. I'm sad to say that that is not the case when it comes to these allegations of racism and bullying uh, by some members of Pride in London. Even to this day, I'm still saying those allegations need to be investigated. We need to see a report, and we need to see action taken against those who were responsible.
Mm. And I know as well, at the march that's happening on the 1st of July, UK Black Pride has been invited to participate as well. Why was that important for you personally?
Well, for those who don't know, the 1st of July is the exact 50th anniversary of the first ever Pride in Britain 50 years ago. Um, a celebration commemoratory march has been organized by veterans from 1972, mostly members of the Gay Liberation Front who helped organize it. But we are working in support and with the help of Stonewall, UK Black Pride, and my own Peter Tatchell Foundation. They are also backing this march on the 1st of July, which will meet at 1 p.m. on the steps of St. Martin's in the Fields Church in Trafalgar Square, and will then retrace the exact route of the 1972 Pride, which went from Trafalgar Square up Charing Cross Road, along Oxford Street to Hyde Park, where we held a gay day, basically a queer picnic in the park. And we're going to replicate that on the 1st of July. And all Pink News friends, supporters, and readers are very welcome to join us.
Excellent. And I know that we've obviously seen some really strident debates in the last few years too about the presence of police at Pride. I know that even just last year, Pride in London actually voted against a motion to ban the police from taking part in the march. Do you have a position on that debate?
Well, quite a few prides around the world have taken a decision to ban the police for a range of different reasons. But here in Britain, we do have a record of police racism, violence, misogyny, and homophobia. And I think that there are very strong, serious concerns that the police, the Metropolitan Police, are institutionally homophobic. That certainly was one of the outcomes of the inquiry and investigation into the serial killings by Stephen Port. The police made a whole host of investigatory errors based on stereotypical assumptions about our community. They failed to act on the evidence, which might have saved the lives of 3 of the victims. So I think on all these grounds, I don't believe that the police should be invited to march in uniform until they clean up their act. By all means, I would welcome officers marching in plain clothes, in casual wear. That's fine. They are welcome. But as an institution, the Met Police stands accused of institutional not only homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, but racism, violence, and misogyny.
And in the early days of the Gay Liberation Front, did you ever experience any issues with the police back then? I know a lot of LGBTQ plus activists have spoken about the fact that in those early days they were not welcomed or tolerated even by police.
Yeah, I mean that on that first Pride parade, given there's only about 700 of us, we were pretty heavily policed, and there were some incidents where police openly abused us. Now, back then, there was no police complaints procedure, no watchdog to hold the police to account, so we just had to lump it. But I think that the police attitude, of course, was in the context that even though there'd been a partial decriminalisation of male homosexuality in England and Wales in 1967, still many aspects of gay male life remained criminalised. And indeed, even lesbians could sometimes fall foul of the law. So I remember the case of a lesbian couple who gave each other a goodnight kiss at Victoria train station. This is about, I think, 1990. And they were arrested and charged under the Public Order Act with behavior likely to cause harassment, alarm, or distress. And these 2 lesbians were taken to court, convicted, and fined £60. So, that kind of attitude was even more prevalent in 1972. Same-sex kissing was definitely an arrestable offence. Um, you know, in fact, in the years after 1967, the number of gay and bisexual men convicted under historic anti-gay laws actually increased by 400%. So the police reaction to the partial decriminalisation was to enforce the remaining laws with ever increasing zealousness. They did not agree with law reform, and they were going at us. And you could sense that on that first Pride, that a lot of the officers were very, very hostile. They basically acted as though we were criminals. And of course, in some respects, we were, because many aspects of our lives were still criminalized and we were still subjected to widespread discrimination. There was no protection against discrimination in housing or employment, for example. An employer could sack someone from their job because they were gay. And just 2 years later, Tony Whitehead was sacked by British Home Stores. Susan Shell, a little while later, was sacked by Barking Council. Um, you know, those are very, very tough times. And the way we were policed reflected the homophobia of that era.
Mm. And I know as well that each year in Pride Month we see the government issuing statements in support of the LGBTQ plus community and in support of Pride Month. We have various government officials who will come forward and wish us all a happy Pride. But obviously, this year, given the government's stance on trans rights, for example, its refusal to ban conversion therapy for trans people, among a whole host of other issues, how do you feel about those kinds of messages of support from our government when they refuse to give our community the most basic protections?
Well, to be blunt, it's hypocritical. You know, the government sending a message of support for Pride, given its failure to enact some pretty basic policies on conversion therapy and trans rights, that is just pure hypocrisy. You know, I throw those words back at them. You know, they are hypocrites. Um, you know, what we want from the government is not sweet words. We want action. We want all of our community protected, including our trans siblings. You know, what the government is doing at the moment is fueling the trans culture wars. And in particular, the recent statement by the Attorney General that schools should not pander to trans kids. I thought that was absolutely outrageous. Using children to score political points, um, failing to recognize the very severe circumstances under which many trans kids exist and the need for support, that is truly shameful.
And I think there's a particular significance this year as we go into Pride Month, seeing all those attacks on the trans community from the government. Do you think that this year's Pride does have extra meaning because of just how persecuted and attacked the trans community and many within the LGBTQ plus community still are?
Absolutely. You know, this pride is a pride where we need to put the politics back in that march. You know, we need to turn up not just with balloons and streamers and rainbow flags. We need to turn up with placards calling out the government to send a message loud and clear to the government through the media and, of course, to members of the public watching on the pavements. We need to send a message loud and clear that we are fed up. We have had enough. It's absolutely shameful that Britain has now dropped to 14th in the European rankings for the best policies on LGBT plus rights. You know, there are many countries way above us. You know, we were at the top a few years ago. Now we've sunk to 14th. That is truly shameful. And it reflects the fact that the government is not taking our rights inclusively and fully. It is not taking a stand against homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia in the way that we have a right to expect.
And I'm conscious that there will be a lot of young people watching this who might be thinking that they would like to kind of get into the activist space and they would like to start fighting for LGBTQ plus rights and maybe just becoming a bit more vocal even about LGBTQ plus rights. Do you have any advice for people out there who might be wanting to get into this space and wanting to join that fight, might be a little bit unsure about how to have their voices heard?
Well, it's really important that if you care about yourself, if you have respect for yourself, if you believe that you are worth equal rights, respect, and dignity, then do something about it. You know, please join an LGBT plus organization, whether it be a youth group or a campaign group. Join an organization and contribute. Do your bit, because all the progress we've made over the last 5 decades has been the result of people getting up off their feet, off their knees, and taking a stand, telling the world that things have to change, lobbying governments and local councils, challenging the media and religious organizations, calling out those who stand against us. You know, progress comes from action, just like the charters of the suffragettes or the original people who fought back at the Stonewall Bar in New York in 1969. Action equals life. action equals progress. So please join an organization and help make that change possible.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Peter. And that's bringing us up to the end of our session today. I just wanted to just give a quick opportunity for you to tell people where they can find you on social media as well.
You can go to my foundation's website, which is petertatchellfoundation.org. In the top right-hand corner of the homepage, there's a button which says Join Us. If you give us your email address, we'll send you a weekly bulletin on a range of LGBT plus and other human rights issues. Mostly very serious, but we always put in a funny, quirky one as well to give you a laugh. It's totally free, there's no charge. And you can follow me on Twitter at Peter Tatchell. But thank you all so much. It's been a great pleasure to join you today. And please do support the LGBT Refugees Welcome campaign by Pink News. Please donate so we can secure refuge for people fleeing persecution in places like Ukraine and Afghanistan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. And details of the LGBTQ plus Refugees Welcome campaign are down below at the bottom of the screen, and you can donate there at the link if you would like to do so. And thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time to speak with us today, and best of luck with the Pride March on the 1st of July.
Thank you.